Joel, how are you doing, man? Thanks for holding with me with the technical problems.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. I do my own podcasts and things, and I know very well the struggle of different issues and microphones not working, have to borrow a microphone from someone else, and just internet problems. Streaming is the worst, though. Live streaming.
Streaming is the worst. Like we want to reinvent money, and we haven't even fucking solved the Bluetooth and video calls, dude.
Yeah, of
But
course.
diving right into it, how long have you been living off Dash by now? I heard of you way back in the day, and I was surprised to know that you're still going at it.
Yeah, it's 5 years, I think, or it will be 5 years towards the end of the year. Um, I believe in 2016, in May, I think I closed my bank account. And from like May to like October or something, I was living unbanked off of Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin started to have issues, and I switched to Dash later in the year. So it's coming up on 5 years.
Coming up on 5 years, and I mean, I'm wondering, did it get easier or harder? That was like the
Gotten
one bit I couldn't I couldn't find.
it's gotten way easier. Some cases no, but most cases yes. In back in the early days, there was there's never really been a high rate of crypto adoption anywhere in the world for any coin at all. It just
No.
we've been doing our best, but for example, there was when I was using Bitcoin, I relied a lot on services that accepted Bitcoin, not a lot of direct payments. And when I switched to Dash, about a third of those services I could still pay directly in Dash, and the other two thirds I used something called Shapeshift. I don't know if people remember back in the day. Shapeshift was an app that allowed you to switch between cryptos, and they had a functionality like, for example, if a site only accepted Bitcoin, because most of them did, they had a functionality that let you pay in something like Dash, and it would switch it over to Bitcoin and send it to them.
Is this Eric Borges Shapeshift?
Yes,
We had
yes,
Ken Barton from Shapeshift the other day here in the podcast. He was great. He's the head of research in
yeah.
there, and this was even before the whole progressive decentralization thing came on. So I'm
Well,
looking forward to
well,
having them back.
I don't want to promote my channel too much, but this week I did upload an interview I did with Eric Voorhees about exactly that, the progressive decentralization part. And so if you want to look at that and then find new questions you want to ask them that I did not ask, then that would be a good starting point.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. But sorry, you were saying like
Hmm.
back in the day it was all Shapeshift, and now?
Yeah, so it was like two-thirds of what I did was Shapeshift, and one-third was paying Dash directly for things that took it. And now, first off, Shapeshift, the old Shapeshift doesn't exist anymore and hasn't existed for a very long time. For a couple years, they had to do KYC and things like that. And then also it just became infeasible to no one was paying with Bitcoin anymore. So no one wanted to convert. All the old places that had a Shapeshift button on them just changed to accepting different coins directly. So now I've been using only Dash for quite some time. I don't think I've had to switch it over for anything. The only thing I've ever had to switch Dash over for in the last like 3 or so years has been, there's this one pizza shop around the corner that has a point of sale system that accepts Bitcoin Cash and Dash, but they have not implemented Dash yet. And I've been trying to contact the owner, and he's very busy to like say just enable this one thing and then we'll be much happier. But other than that, that's like the one reason I've had to switch over to something else in the last 3 years for the most part.
And what was the something else?
Bitcoin Cash. And
Right.
the reason for that is because he's sort of the owner of the pizza shop went into uh, buy Bitcoin from an ATM, and the owner of the ATM uh, runs the AnyPay point of sale system, or the former. I don't know if they're in the ATM business anymore, but at the time they did that, and then just said, "Hey, you're buying this stuff. Why don't you take it for your business?" And he's like, "Oh, okay," but he didn't know like very low information on crypto in general. Just like, all right, I'll take the Bitcoin. And so they got him to take a few different kinds of Bitcoin, but still just the Bitcoin. So other than that, it's been basically able to do whatever.
Is it sort of like an ideological standpoint that you just wouldn't use BTC?
There are some people, I mean, that I would not,
Sorry?
or the business. I mean, for me, an ideological thing,
Yeah,
or
for
for a
yourself.
business owner. Uh, Not really, because obviously that ideological standpoint did not prevent me from using BTC when I was living off of it. The
Right.
problem is it just became impractical at some point because the fees started to get too expensive, the transaction times became too long, and also very few new services started to accept it and just became, difficult. And that was what, like 5 years straight of being difficult to use, and so I'm not going to sit around waiting for it to be useful. I'm living my life in the meantime. I do run a Lightning Network node, and I'm trying to use that just not because I need to, not because it serves a practical purpose to me at all, but for an experimental purpose. I just want to see if this is ever going to work as something to send BTC, or can I just forget about it completely?
I was just writing an article about Lightning, well,
Hmm.
layer twos in general, and I was very
Yeah.
surprised to see all the misconceptions that we have as a community about Lightning. Like
Hmm.
once you go actually deep into how it works, and
Hmm.
forget about like the selling points of it or the marketing of it,
Hmm.
and you get right into the workings, it's very different of how you would initially conceptualize
Hmm.
it. Um, I'm just curious of the proposition of Dash, I guess, because
Hmm.
we were talking about this on Telegram before
Yeah.
before this. You were debating tone base, and I was
Yeah.
like, I would not listen to that. I cannot stand the man.
Of
But
course.
and this is me personally, but when on the walk back, I was in a coffee shop, and when I was texting
Mhm.
you, and I started walking back, and I was like, okay, I think I can do that for like 15 minutes. It's not gonna kill
Mhm.
me. So I
Yeah.
started listening into it, and it's 3 years ago,
Mhm.
more than 3 years ago. So a lot of things have changed. But it was funny to me that whenever he's arguing about the Bitcoin fees and why they're so big because
Mhm.
Bitcoin is so popular, like he's like unintentionally proving your points, the point that you're making about why you wouldn't use
Yeah.
BTC for daily payments.
Yeah. Well, that's true. And his art, I mean, just to speak very briefly on Tone Vase, his whole argumentation thing, he wants, he has it in his mind that Bitcoin is the one that's going to work. And so every argumentation point is just to win the argument. I don't think, whereas for me, like, I don't, if someone comes up with a good argument for why something else is better, I'm going to listen to them. Right. So we come from two different standpoints as far as that. But there is a certain bit of truth to the whole Bitcoin's expensive because it's popular. And there is a certain grain of truth to that, that everyone's using it, and that a lot, when Bitcoin was not popular, it was cheap. That is true. However, what I'm looking for is something that is cheap even when it's popular. And because I want it to be popular, I want everyone to use money that no one can censor. And if everyone's using it, but it's too expensive, then no one can use it. So you kind of have to have both. And that's an interesting metric that you see on blockchains, which right now is a relatively meaningless metric because only Bitcoin and Ethereum count, but it's total fees. It's not fees per transaction, or it's all the fees that the entire network processes. Because if you had a million people spending crypto every day, that would be, let's just say for 1 cent per transaction, that's like a million cents. I'm too stupid to do the math really quickly right now, but at least that would be a large total fee number, even
Yeah.
if the per transaction is best. Now, I think that the Bitcoin and Ethereum fees, the total fees spent, if they didn't have to spend that much, are, that's just the upper limit of how much people are willing to spend, but that's not how much people would prefer to spend if they had alternatives. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
I mean, when you talk about this popularity thing, that was
Hmm.
his argument on this discussion. And by the way, I'm completely on your side when it comes to this
Hmm.
debating thing, man. People ask me to have people on the channel to debate against them, and I'm like, dude, I won't debate anyone ever. Like
Hmm.
that's just a waste of time, right? If you're just trying to push your point of view on top of someone, like the
Hmm.
most interesting conversations just happen when you're like yes and not no, but it's like
Hmm.
completely different way of building things. I'm
Yeah.
with the popularity argument as well. You would
Hmm.
think that if something gets worse, the most popular it gets, like that's it should be pretty obvious that it's not sustainable, right?
Yeah. It's funny. There's an expression that's like, no one goes there anymore. It's too crowded.
Oh, okay.
You know,
I get it.
of course, which is kind of ridiculous because it can't be crowded if no one goes there anymore. But
Right.
it is true that there are some places or some things that are too popular for their capacity. And, but then there's competition. It flows off over to other competitors. Like if there's only one bar in town and it's too popular, no one wants to go there because everyone's there. And you open up a second bar, then a lot of those people who would prefer to go to the first bar if it had the capacity now go to the second bar. And that's the way it works.
And that's the difference within like virtual things and physical things, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if I'm a headphone maker and
Mm-hmm.
I have way too many orders, that can crash my business. Whether if I'm doing
Of
YouTube
course.
videos, it doesn't matter if 1,000 million people come here, like they can still come and enjoy the
Mm-hmm.
experience that I'm selling them. Well, and since you mentioned the bar metaphor, that leads
Mm-hmm.
us to like very naturally to hard forks. And
Mm-hmm.
it's good to mention for people that are watching this that are not very aware of what Dash is, that
Mm-hmm.
Dash actually started out as a fork of Bitcoin, right? Can you
Yes.
can you speak a bit about the history of Dash and how it comes to be what it is currently?
Yes. So before I go into that, I have to, for the for the viewers at home, as they say, there's two different definitions that people say when they say hard fork. There's two things that they're actually talking about that are a little bit different. One is a code base fork, which means you take the code, you copy it, and make changes to it. And there's another one which is a chain split, like a chain fork, which is you actually take not just the code but also the transaction history of the entire chain, and then you split it off. And so, for example, uh, when it's kind of the difference between, um, like, let's say you have a political party, and then you have two different opinions in that political party, and you cannot reconcile the differences, and then the party splits into two. That would be a chain split, right? But then the other hand, a fork would be just a regular old fork. Would be, you look at a different political party, you copy their constitution and their founding principles and make some changes and start your own political party from zero. That's kind of more what Dash did, right? It's not, it didn't used to be Bitcoin and then became Dash. It was always Dash from the beginning. Or more importantly, it was founded in early 2014 by Evan Duffield, who's a man from Arizona, a developer. And it was first called Xcoin for like a week or something. It was a very, very short period of time. And that's because it pioneered the X11 hashing algorithm, which is used kind of 11 different hashing algorithms together to make a better, more decentralized, supposedly mining thing. But over a course of time, that always turns into professional ASIC mining machines anyway. So it started as that. And then it was originally forked from the Litecoin code base. And Litecoin had a inflation bug in the beginning. Coin was created on the first day, the supply curve, rather than being like smooth, goes straight up for a little while and then over. And so Dash inherited this bug and had something, and it was a little bit more dramatic because of some different changes, such as the difficulty adjustment algorithm. And so a big bunch of coins got created on the first day. They fixed it, they patched it because the founder had a full-time job. And so he was at work, running on his other computer, trying to put out the fires over here while he's like at work. And so that got fixed. And then within a few, I guess a few weeks, a few months, the coin was rebranded to Dark Coin. because the after the initial like hashing algorithm, like let's just experiment with a coin and see if this new hashing algorithm works. They decided, okay, why don't we make something valuable? Why don't we actually do something cool and provide an extra privacy function to what is otherwise basically like a Bitcoin fork? And oh, by the way, I didn't mention that Dash was originally forked from Litecoin, but because Litecoin had no development really going on at the time, or very little, then and including this bug that ended up being a big pain in the ass, then it was reforked from Bitcoin. So it started as a Litecoin fork, but then they just switched it to be more of a Bitcoin fork. So that's the way it is today. And so
You wouldn't
yeah.
even think of, just as a caveat there, you wouldn't
Hmm.
even think of like the founder of a big project that's like making waves in the space having a
Hmm.
full-time job in another thing right now, right? Like that's
Yeah.
completely unconceivable 7 years later.
Yeah, and it was a early days type thing. A lot of that was the same thing in the early days, but it's also Evan Duffield is a little bit different from Satoshi Nakamoto in that Satoshi planned something out pretty meticulously, thought of his own anonymity, for example, to for security reasons, etc., and started this big revolution. Whereas Dash's founder in the very beginning was kind of just experimenting, he was playing around, didn't expect this to be a major thing in the beginning, but later that ended up happening. And so Dash became Darkcoin and focused on uh, coin mixing, which is it's something you can do on any cryptocurrency, any Bitcoin based chain, especially where like you take your money with the money of a bunch of different people and I'll put it in the same pile, mix it together and get the same amount back, but you might have that person's $5 bill or that person's $20 bill. So basically no one can tell where the money came from when you send it. And so
Right.
just a
So
basic
basically, the
yes.
way I think of mixing is like throwing a tomato in a salad. You just mix it up
Yeah.
and pick the next tomato you find, and you never know
Yeah.
which one you
That's
took.
exactly the way it works. And the difference with Dash is for a long time people had a problem trusting whoever's doing the mixing. And a lot of times it's a centralized company or something like that, or something that the government could then spy on or seize or something. But Dash built it into the actual protocol itself. And so that was like the first big thing. But then over time, it was like, well, now that we've created basically a Bitcoin copy, except with one of the serious issues with Bitcoin, which now people are starting to realize. Back then, people still thought Bitcoin was anonymous. Uh, After they fix that, saying, well, let's fix other things. Like right now, it's cheap to run a Bitcoin node, but one day it'll be expensive. So let's make a incentivized node called a master node that then you can actually get paid to run part of the network. Just like with miners, if you run that part of the network, you get paid. But if you run a non-mining node, you don't get paid. And so it was basically to fix that problem. And a whole bunch of different coins use master nodes today, or some kind of other incentivized node. And then it became okay. Well, we're working for free as developers, or we're relying on a foundation, the Dash Foundation, with people donating to it to try to get things funded. And this doesn't work out that well. Let's create a protocol level development funding mechanism called a treasury that basically means that now everything that you need to do to run the entire project is self-sustained, self-paid for by the network itself.
I'm I mean, with the mixing thing in particular,
Hmm.
since we stuck for a bit in there, and something that sticks with me is that Dash has this privacy angle that some
Hmm.
people try to push and some people don't try and push. Some people
Hmm.
might think it's more important in the chain and some don't. And in general, I think that those disservice, at least in the point of view of people that are not diving deep into Dash, but just
Hmm.
those that are in the ecosystem and are sort of aware of it. I think that just creates a little contradiction that makes us feel, as people again that are not very deep
Hmm.
into Dash, like there's an internal contradiction going on in there.
Yeah.
Would you care to explain why that is?
Yes, there's definitely a disagreement on messaging on this case. And as usual, it's because the reality of a situation is more complicated than you would want to say right away. So
Mhm.
first off, the concept of privacy is there's different levels to this, and there will be some people that try to talk about this as a binary thing. It's either private or it's not, and that's not exactly true. Definitely not. So, for example, the Dash blockchain, just like the Bitcoin blockchain, all that is entirely transparent. Anyone can see any transaction happening at any time. They don't need any special permissions. It's all very public. And Bitcoin, of course, is pseudonymous, meaning it's not anonymous, but you don't know that necessarily the people who are behind each transaction, and Dash is the same. Now, the difference is it's very easy to trace Bitcoin transactions. And so, what Dash's privacy thing does is it, and by the way, this exists on Bitcoin as well, but it's not in the protocol itself. People use wallets like, say, the Samurai wallet or the Wasabi wallet or other things like that to provide these additional layers of privacy. But basically, all it does is you can see the entire blockchain, but when you mix funds and you send a payment, no one knows where that came from. And that basically breaks what they call the transaction graph, or the breaks like the chain of transactions, so that, for example, if I pay for my coffee, someone, the company that takes the coffee doesn't look back, see how much money I have, and then later, next time I come in, hire someone to rob me, for example, or charge me more money because they think I'm a rich person or something. And so it's basic privacy, which I think no one is going to use anything that doesn't have this, right? The only reason that people are still using other things without it is because they don't realize how much information they're leaving out there, and there's not enough thieves that have figured out how to do this to harass people. Now, so basically, if I use this functionality correctly, no one can tell where pretty much no one can tell where I'm sending my money, or if I receive it, no one can tell where I got it from. Now, the things that are not hidden are like everything else. So, for example, if I have an address and someone sends me money privately, no, they don't know where it came from, but they do know that I have this money, that I received it. And then if I then mix it and I send it out, they know that I mix and send out. They don't know where I sent it, but then they know I sent it out. And so, for example, what happens if I steal all your money, which I would never do because you seem like a nice guy. And also, it's just crime is very difficult. Crime is very
and
difficult
also
to
be,
pay for.
and also
Yeah.
because right now it would be very easy for me to say it was you.
Yeah. So if I steal all your money, and let's just say for argument's sake, it's like 100 Dash. It's only 100 Dash, right? And then so it gets stolen, it gets mixed, and then you kind of figured out where you think the hacker or me is. You think, okay, a US based IP address. And then on Coinbase, 100 Dash that was mixed just shows up. I'm trying to sell it. It's like, okay, everyone knows what's going on here. Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to see like the disappear. And that doesn't mean it's not private, of course. It doesn't mean that you can try does not mean you can't trace the transactions. But so there's other cryptocurrencies, like let's just say Zcash, for example. When you're using encrypted privacy methods, you cannot see what's going on at all, really. You cannot see, I mean, obviously this is a optional thing for Zcash, so there are some transparent transactions, but if you're using the anonymity function, it just, you can't see any of it. And so basically the purposes are very different, right? Some people who are trying to operate completely anonymously would want something stronger, right? They want, well, not stronger, but something that obscures everything. So you just can't see anything. Now, people like, let's just say like me, who just lives off of crypto, I don't mind that, like the company that pays me or whatever, or who like that they can see that there's money going in and out. I don't mind that I don't mind that some things are out there. I just don't want people to know how much money I have, where I got it from, where I'm spending it. It's like a
Right.
consumer grade versus like a hacker grade type privacy. And those are very different. Those are very different purposes. And so Dash does the first, which, and so does Bitcoin. So does Bitcoin. Well, not protocol level, but there's tools out there for this. So does Bitcoin Cash. So do a lot of different things have that consumer grade privacy, which I think is a very basic requirement for anyone using this stuff. Like if you swipe your credit card, no one knows who you paid. The company that took your payment doesn't know how much money you have left in your account. Like all this is just not shown. Of course, if the government or the bank, they all know everything. But so that's a basic requirement for anyone using things. Now, completely anonymous, no one can tell who paid what, anything like that. No one can see any of the money. That's not something that everyone needs. I do argue that that's very valuable, by the way, but it's not the same category. So what happens is regulators, first off, I don't believe regulators should be banning or putting pressure on either of these things, but they are categorizing Dash in the second category with things like Zcash when it should be in the first category of things like Bitcoin. So some people in Dash have been trying to communicate this, that's saying, no, we're not a privacy coin. We're only in this first, we're in this first Bitcoin-like category. We just have more efficient features of doing this in order to avoid, first off, avoid mischaracterization, because you want people to understand what you're actually about, but also because you don't want to get delisted off of exchanges. Let's be honest. That's the big thing. And then there's other people that don't necessarily disagree with that, but they strategically say we shouldn't tell people we're not about privacy, because we are. We shouldn't lose track of what we actually use, because it's an important part of who we are. So there's just a messaging disagreement on that whole complex situation. That's kind of what you see.
One thing that you say that really stuck with me is
Hmm.
the fact that there are not people improving the technology here, and that is the technology to obscure your balances to
Hmm.
everyone,
Hmm.
your overall transaction history every time you send a transaction, because there are not enough people with malicious intent trying to take advantage of that. So
Yeah.
in that kind of way, you kind of need like the negative adoption to fuel the
Hmm.
positive adoption in one way, which is something that I never thought about. That's
Yeah.
an excellent point.
And the one thing this is going to be very interesting to see how this turns out, because uh, Bitcoin, Dash, all those kinds of currencies work on the UTXO model, which, to be super, because I don't really like to talk about it in a complicated way anyway, but to be super easy on this, it's like cash. Like, I have $20, and if I want to pay you $10, I have to send you $20. You send 10 back, and then now I have a 10. Or then maybe I have a five. Maybe I have a five and four ones and some change. I have to send you the five, four ones and some change, and they could all be in different addresses, for example. And so that's the way Bitcoin, things like that work. Whereas stuff like Ethereum and Nano, for example, those are the two that come to mind, have a account-based model where it's just one address and a balance. So if for anyone who's ever used cryptocurrency with any more than like literally once, you have to create you're supposed to create a new address for every payment. Now, for Ethereum, that's not the case at all. You have one address and that's it. So everyone who you send money to can see your entire balance, all the money you have at any one time. And that's pretty crazy if you think about it. Like, it just, and Bitcoin used to work this way a little bit, where people just had one address usually. And at some point you started getting a new address every time. But that's something that's crazy, because people are using, like, oh yeah, they buy, like, you buy an NFT for this much money, and then the person you bought it from can say how much money you have, and sometimes it's a hell of a lot of money, and then that, then they kidnap you and like hit you over the head with a baseball bat until you give them all your money. Like, that's, I can't believe that people are still not caring about privacy on that basic sense, because it's a huge security risk. It's just like wearing a jacket of all your money, just like pasting dollar bills, just walking around showing people how much money you have. That's crazy.
Right, or like having a credit card that says I'm rich on it, or
Yeah.
not,
Can you
or I'm
imagine?
poor. But in any case,
Yeah. Can you imagine a credit card that had a little electronic display on it that showed your account balance?
yeah, that
That would be
wouldn't
crazy.
that would have been nice. But back in like a little
Hmm.
side story here, in Argentina we have two different rates of exchange. So one is the
Hmm.
official dollar rate, and then there's a parallel dollar rate. And when I
Hmm.
got here, the difference was like now it's almost double. Like
Mm.
$1 in the black market would go twice as long as a dollar in the official market. So, but somehow Western Union works with the unofficial rate.
Hmm.
So I was unaware of this, and someone sent me a payment through Western Union, and man, did I feel sketchy leaving that Western Union with the bag full of money. And everyone
Yeah.
online saw me get like. And by the way, the bills have not catched up with inflation, right? So
Hmm.
you have $5, but the stack of bills is like this. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's scary. And that's like the crypto equivalent. Justin
Yeah, of course.
Neckenhofer, he was also talking about how in DeFi, thanks to these
Hmm.
things, then people can give you different insurance rates given on how rich you are, on who you
Hmm.
transacted with, and everything. So this is effectively like building systems for surveillance.
Hmm.
And one thing that I'm asking everyone these days is when you mentioned privacy coins
Hmm.
and privacy by default, you went straight to Zcash. And I find that Zcash is getting less and less relevant every day. I think that
Mm.
Monero is somewhat displacing it. But do you think this is just something that with the people that have been here for a long time, Zcash just sort of stuck with you guys, or
Well, there's a couple of different things. First off, I'm not an expert in this area, but from what I understand, what I am most interested in for privacy technology is a coin called Firo, which used to be called Zcoin, not Zcash, because they just are in the process of implementing something called Lelantus, which is a really interesting way of completely erasing transaction history every time you send. And I mean, I do know that a lot of, like for example, some people who are working on research for Monero in the past are working now for Firo. So there seems to be some little bit of a movement that way. But so Monero is a little bit of an older technology on that thing, and I kind of view, so if I would say like Ethereum is the zero privacy, right? And then Dash or Bitcoin Cash with mixing would be the one level. I would kind of consider Monero to be like a 1.5 because the way it does transactions is a little bit different. So, for example, with zero knowledge proofs and like Zcash and stuff, every and obviously there's people who are way more technical that are going to lose their minds right now. You're such an idiot. You don't want to. Okay, whatever. But basically, you encrypt the transaction completely. Now, what Monero does is it does through a decoy method, where if I send you money, I send money to 5 or 6 different people. And one of those is the true person, but you don't know which one. And there's some special keys that allow us to see that. And so you can see everything, but it's obscured because you don't know which one's the real one. And there have been a few different errors and bugs over the years that have found this out, that they've been able to deduce which one it was. For example, at one point they say, hey, if someone sends you a payment of all these ones, it's a much higher likelihood that the most recent payment is the real one than the older ones because it sends like 5 decoys. And there was recently, I think this was just like last week, or
last
because
week? I know which one you're about to refer
yeah,
to. Definitely last week.
yeah, it of a specific wallet implementation that if you sent it right away, if you received a payment and sent it right away, there was a high likelihood that they could find out which one was your payment. Again, not 100%, but high. And so if you waited like about an hour, then you could send it and it would be a lot safer. And at the same time, do you remember all those Monero forks that happened, the chain splits that happened like a year or two ago?
Mm, I started getting. Oh, okay, this is relevant. So I'm gonna sidetrack a
Yes.
bit, but like, this is
Yes.
relevant because I didn't know that much about privacy coins, and I got
Mm-hmm.
very interested in Firo in particular. So
Mm-hmm.
I invited Ruben Yap on this podcast, and he was
Good guy.
great, great guy, one of my favorite guests of all time,
Mm-hmm.
and me, very innocently, I took that episode and I posted it on the subreddits of all the privacy coins. Big mistake, because the Monero
Because the
people
Monero,
really don't like this.
yeah.
They really didn't like it. It's like they're very purist, and of course, because Firo had a pre-mine, and they
Mm-hmm.
just didn't go through their whole checklist of what a coin should do, which is like something that it can be argued both ways. You can argue why it should and why it shouldn't, or why.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of history in that too. That's very recent, by the way, because if you had done this about a year ago, there would have been still a negative response, I think, but less negative response. It's just that in the last couple months, some old school Monero people moved over and started working for Firo, and they're upset about that, as well as the Monero forum funding system, like the way they crowdfund money for development projects. one of the guys copied that over for Firo and like literally copied it completely, and possibly while he was still working and getting paid by Monero. And so people are really upset at that. So there's a reason why this is so hostile today.
And that was just what I was about to say. And
Mm-hmm.
the good thing about this is like the whole thing caused such a big mess on Reddit for like about
Mm-hmm.
23 hours that Big Sharma from Cake Wallet offered to come on the podcast and talk about
Mm-hmm.
Monero and why these
Mm-hmm.
things caused the problems that it did. So in the end, everything just followed a very positive line, and that episode with Big Sharma from Cake Wallet was also
Mm-hmm.
brilliant. In
Yeah.
the I mean, we strayed away from the point a little bit. Would you mind going
Mm-hmm.
back to why this and not Zcash, or is Zcash the level
Yeah.
two?
Yeah. So Zcash and probably Firo would be more in the level 2 category where it's a little bit more complete. Uh, there was, as I mentioned about the chain splits, that was another thing with Monero where a few different coins, when they changed the hashing algorithm, split off. Just like there was like a Monero or O, like a Monero original. There was a few different, you know, I would call them kind of shit coins. Just they didn't go anywhere, but they were still forks. And what was found out is if you claimed your coins on when there's a split, like say Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, all that, and it's all in the same wallet, and but you specifically claim your forked coins. I'm sure you remember doing that process. And so if you did that with Monero and Monero's forks, if you claimed coins on another chain, it would reveal what are your real coins on the Monero chain and destroy your privacy. And so, and more importantly, if because of the big anonymity set out there, if enough people on every person that claimed their coins on the other thing didn't just harm their privacy, they harmed the entire privacy of every Monero user. So if let's say the let's just say half the Monero users claimed their free airdrop coins or whatever they want to call their forked coins, then that would significantly like rule out a whole bunch of fake addresses out there and make the entire pool of possible payments and stuff very much smaller and make it Monero as a whole much less private unless you did some extra kind of things. So, and none of these are like particularly bad on their own. It just each one of these kind of showcases that the decoy model is a difficult model to keep 100% private all the time. And I think that eventually, I believe personally, that Monero is going to move away from the decoy model eventually, just because it's kind of like sort of like coin mixing in that it's complicated to get everything done, and it's much easier to do something like say Lelantis that Firo does, or zero knowledge proofs, for example.
In the I mean, in favor of that argument,
Mm-hmm.
like you say, every time that something happens with Monero, it's always
Mm-hmm.
because someone managed to find something in the decoy model. And this
Mm-hmm.
was what Ruben was saying. In the end, you have to move away from that model because it's precisely the way that you're approaching things
Mm-hmm.
that it's just better to jump boat instead of just
Mm-hmm.
keep trying to improve the boat if you're heading towards an iceberg. Um,
Yeah, of course. And so there's nothing wrong with like, for example, coin mixing is also kind of like a decoy, not really a decoy model, but it's similar in that everything is transparent except they just mix up who did what, and so it's a little bit different. The thing is, when you're doing a coin mixing model coin, I think one should, or I mean, hopefully, have a better understanding of the risks you're taking. Of this is transparent stuff. You're just trying to keep people from seeing where you sent this money or who you received it from, and that's it. And the problem is with something like Monero, where you're trying to make everything private, everything obscured, but then you're going through this kind of old school way of doing that. That becomes a lot more complicated. And so, it's kind of funny how if you're talking about like I would say hype is the wrong word, but if you're talking about public perception, then Monero's fully on the private side, and Dash is in this awkward position of being torn between two sides. Is it private? Is it not? That's the public perception thing. When if you talk about it on a technological standpoint, Dash is firmly in the like just basic consumer level privacy thing. And Monero is the one that's being torn between the two of, is it going to be just like a basic kind of easy to use cache that's pretty private, but might not have things, or is it going to be super anonymous like some of these encrypted coins? So that's just kind of my perspective on that space. But again, I would not consider myself an expert in anything. And if you disagree with me, don't argue with me because I won't have anything for you. just ask someone smart. Ask someone smarter than me.
No, but I think what you did was a great
Mm-hmm.
rundown, especially from the
Mm-hmm.
Dutch perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we went on a lot of tangents there, but that sort of like drove
Mm-hmm.
across the point of why there's this distinction
Mm-hmm.
between whether Dash is private or not. I
Mm-hmm.
would I would then go on to like the next point on the
Mm-hmm.
Dutch agenda, let's say, which is the
Mm-hmm.
store of value meme, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at some point, the point that people at Dash make, and that's something that I always ask people, because this is sort of that kind of thing where everyone sort of like ascribes different meanings to the words.
Mm-hmm.
So like everyone's having a whole different conversation. And well, Bitcoin was supposed to be like this peer-to-peer payments system, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like on the cover of the white paper, undisputed. And then it just derived into these things that maximalists believe it's a store of value, although it sometimes goes 10 times higher in
Yeah.
value, which doesn't really seem like storing,
Yeah.
particularly when the things tend to swing the other way. And some would even argue that Bitcoin right now is in the hands of people that believe that to be true, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what are your positions in this in general. I'm leaving as,
Yeah.
as open as I can so that you can bring
Yeah.
comment.
So what people don't understand necessarily is there's two aspects to this, right? So let's just take gold, for example. When gold used to be money, there's two aspects to what gold was, or the role that it occupied is a like money, like a store of value, and a trade clearing instrument or a medium of exchange, let's just say. And so gold, the raw material, was the money, but the coins allowed it to be an efficient form of trading, because if I just give you a lump of gold, you don't know what the hell to do with that. It's probably gold, but if it has like the seal of a mint, it's okay, this is actual gold, and it says exactly the quantity of gold and then the value, the denomination, like $1 or something or whatever it is. And so those two those are the two aspects of money that we need. We need that. I mean, I'm sure there's a million more, but that's just for the sake of this conversation, right? And so over time, the gold tech part of the technology did not evolve, and the trade clearing side of things, the exchange, did evolve, and sometimes not in good ways. So, for example, you had like a gold certificate, a piece of paper that just says this is this much money, and you trade it, and then there's still gold in a bank somewhere. But that started to become more and more extended. You had to trust more and more. Whereas, like for example, if you have a gold coin, it says 1 ounce of gold, and you can take that, you can trust that, or you can take the metal, test it, and see if it's gold. You can weigh it and see if it's an ounce. Whereas when it's a paper street, you go, oh, it's in the bank somewhere. And eventually that broke off, and they just got rid of the gold, and then they have this bullshit fiat stuff, right? And so those two things that Bitcoin sought to solve. One is uh, an actual stable source of value, an actual sound money. And the second is uncensorable digital cash or peer to peer electronic cash, right? And so those are two hugely important things. And what happened was Bitcoin got rid of, or it became much less useful for peer to peer electronic cash. And what we found is the free market is an interesting thing, because everyone, even people who believe in the free market, don't understand the free market because the free market does what it wants. It's always right, and if you don't think it's right, you're wrong. You don't understand it well enough. So what we saw is, okay, there was a split between the Bitcoins, but also a year before the split, I was already living on Dash for a year before Bitcoin Cash existed, right? There was other options out there. And what we found is over time, the payment based coins, the coins that are good for payments, did not do as well in the markets as something like Bitcoin, and then to a much greater extent, DeFi, any DeFi platforms. And it might seem to say like, the maximalists were right or something like that, uh, which I don't agree with, but there's a grain of truth to that, which is, first off, in the developed world, right, in the West, and the major Asian countries, and all that, they, for the most part, you can buy whatever you want. Like if you have a credit card or bank account, you can buy anything you want. No one's stopping you. There's a few things you can't do, or there's sometimes like, oh, we placed your account on hold because we know suspicious activity. There's some of those things, but for the most part, the average person can buy whatever the hell they want. So what digital cash is solving is a problem that's a very insignificant problem for most people in the developed world. Now, on the other hand, uh, everyone, obviously in Argentina it's worse, but in Venezuela it's worse than that. But in most countries, everyone is losing value on their dollar or their peso or their euro year after year after year. But more importantly, beyond that, the average person wants to be able to make money. And the average person has a lot of barriers before they can invest. You have to be, like in the US, for example, you need to be an accredited investor and all this other kind of stuff. There's all these barriers before you can buy. If you haven't talked to Ken Bozak yet, he's a very interesting person. I would call him the mascot of cryptocurrency. And he is the heart and soul of the cryptocurrency space for all the good and all the bad that entails. And
The what?
so
Sorry.
the heart and soul of
No, but
cryptocurrency,
you would call him the what?
the mascot, like
The mascot.
the guy like wearing the little suit,
Yeah.
And so his whole journey, I tell this story a lot because it's super relevant, is when he became close to 30 years old, he saw some gray in his beard, and he just says, oh shit, I'm an adult now and I don't think I have my shit together. So what do adults do? They invest. I need to invest. And so he hears about Snapchat, because Snapchat had their IPO around then. He says, I want to invest in that. So he goes to his bank and just says, I want to invest in Snapchat. And they just laugh at him like, yeah, get out of here. You can't do that. Like, you're not an accredited investor. You have like $20 you want to throw in there or whatever. And so he got really sad. And then he heard about Bitcoin, that you don't have to have a barrier. And that's how he got into crypto. He just like, oh, I can invest. And it's a kind of a silly story, but it's so many people want to be able to just put money, a small amount without a restriction, into something and be able to make more money out of it. And that is that's a bigger barrier than censorless payments right now. And so that's where the market's selected for. That's because no one could do that. And now, like with DeFi, is, I would say, like, what they say about the real Bitcoin or whatever, I would say like DeFi is the real Bitcoin, kind of, because
I haven't heard that one.
because it does what Bitcoin does, which is number go up. It increases value over time, but more, because you can stake this here and then liquidity provide there and all this other stuff, and then you can just make your number go up. And so that's why the payment coins have not done well historically. Now, where that can change, though, because the government censored investment and store value much more than they censored payments. As soon as that changes, though, then we're going to see something very different. As soon as, for example, let's say everyone gets on a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, and then they start tying your payments to your social credit score or something like that, or they just try to block you from buying fast food because you're eating too much of bad food and you're on socialized medicine, and they don't want to pay for your costs of when you get sick because you're a big fat person. And then they block you from spending at McDonald's, for example. But when that sort of stuff starts happening, then all of a sudden the price of payment coins is going to go woo, like way up.
I mean, that is a great point, because you're right. I couldn't, when I was like 18 years old, reading Rich Dad Poor Dad or whatever,
Yeah, of
for
course.
the first time, because I picked it up in the school library. I'm like, oh, I have this like matrix, and I have to earn money like this and like this and like that. And how does one invest? And then you look at the Mexican stock market, and whenever I'm Mexican. not that I'm just trying to get into exotic markets when I'm 18 years old. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, let's try and put some money on this. And how does one do that? And turns out you
Mm-hmm.
cannot just show up with your credit card and pay for stocks and on the
Yeah.
stock market website. It doesn't work like that. Back in the day, if I had bought Bitcoin, I would live in a way nicer house. But
Mm-hmm.
you're right that is the thing that market selected for. It would
Mm-hmm.
be interesting. There are right now all these regulations trying to come up and regulate
Mm-hmm.
everything, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think if all of these bills pass for the worst of the crypto industry, if they do
Mm-hmm.
manage to regulate everything that Elizabeth Warren and such are trying to regulate right now, do you think that would move the market more into the payment side or more into the investing side?
It's very difficult to tell because it depends on exactly what is regulated in what way. I think that it will probably have a little bit of the effect of moving it towards the payment side because the big reason that people love cryptocurrency is because it is trading it, right? Buying and selling it and investing and staking in this and that is almost unregulated. It's has very little regulation on it. And so people can go in and make their money. Now it becomes difficult to go in and make their money. It becomes like the old stock system, except just with digital stocks, right? It's still going to have value, but a lot of that value proposition just going to go away. And so people will, I think that'll just decrease the value proposition for cryptocurrency in the West, period, like across the board. But then relative to the number go up value, I think that then that will help out payment coins. But it all depends on, um, it depends on a lot of things, to be honest. But I think what we're going to see is uh, people are going to start buying more cryptocurrencies in general, just because I think people are starting to see inflation in, for example, the US. In other countries, of course, they see a little bit sooner, but now, like, I have noticed, I've seen prices increase over the last 2 years. Like, I've noticed, I've been waiting for it, but I've noticed it. Like, my $16 haircut went up to $18 and is now $20, and that was over this course of 8 months. So I'm seeing it. Once people start seeing it, they get scared. They put money in again for the store of value, not for payments. But then they have all this money. That's how are they going to spend their cryptocurrency? And sometimes they don't want to tell the government that they have it. So they just want to spend it without that. Or sometimes they don't want to just tell their bank because then the bank is going to refuse to do business this, or they're going to say, oh, well, you have this limitation on the other thing, or whatever it is. When people want to, when people want to spend the crypto, I don't think anyone's going to buy cryptocurrency so they can spend it. But I think people will buy cryptocurrency and then they will find ways of spending it.
Okay, I'm gonna send to the quick message from our sponsors. I forgot for like 45
Yeah, no
minutes,
problem.
and we'll be right back
Hmm.
to it. Guys, this is the only ad. Takes 30 seconds. Don't leave the video. Take this chance to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. We'll be right
Watch it
back
and buy the stuff.
and buy the stuff. The Blockchain People podcast is brought to you by Coin Payments, the world's first and leading crypto payment processor. Coin Payments serves over 70,000 merchants in over 200 nations with industry low fees since 2013. The Coin Payments wallet lets users hold over 2,000 different cryptocurrencies, which is why they're used by giants such as NordVPN and Binance. Whether you're a merchant or an individual looking to get paid in crypto, Coin Payments could be just what you need. And I mean, where did we live?
Oh,
Well,
talking
we
about
can
the
start
store of
talking
value
YouTubers
versus,
on the
well,
off the
yeah,
record.
the store of value versus the payments coin
Exactly.
kind of
And
thing.
my question, because you said when these things happen, price of the payments coin is gonna go higher, right? Of the payment coins,
Yeah.
which I mean, it sounds funny to say that because it's a bit of an oxymoron, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
saying that something that should be stable, so we can transact on it, can
Mm-hmm.
go up in value as soon as something happens, and there are a couple arguments in there. One is like,
Mm-hmm.
let's call it a tone-based argument, based on this video that I was watching with you,
Mm-hmm.
that he would say like, "Oh, but it goes up because it's so popular. You cannot stop
Mm-hmm.
it because it's unregulated." and you're like,
Hmm.
yeah, sort of. Nowadays, also Balaji. How do you pronounce
Hmm.
his last name?
Which guy is this?
Balaji. He used to be like the CEO of Coinbase, and he's like a really
Yeah.
popular futurist right now.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't pay attention to him,
Sir,
unfortunately.
Srinivasan something like it's just
Hmm.
like five non-vowels on
Hmm.
the start of his name. So like
Yeah.
pretty hard to pronounce that.
It's like
Uh,
like the in the German or Polish tradition with 5 consonants in a row.
right,
Yeah.
right, right. Consonants. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, English is a second language.
Hmm.
So you have to. He's proposing that we should start using stable coins, but that are sort of pegged to
Hmm.
baskets of goods. That
Hmm.
way, they can sort of be an actual hedge against inflation.
Hmm.
Which, if you read like the anthropology of money, not
Hmm.
like the Western version of people used to pay each other in gold, which isn't
Hmm.
actually true, or people
Hmm.
would resort to barter, which is also not completely true. That
Hmm.
would make more sense, right? Do you have any arguments that are pro the fact that a coin that we use for daily payments can be
Hmm.
constantly fluctuating in dollars? Because I reckon
Hmm.
that when you're going around paying people in crypto, as much as you're doing your best to opt out of the system,
Hmm.
what people are doing on the receiving end is that they're immediately exchanging to fiat, right?
Uh,
Some of them.
in about half the cases, maybe. Like every single business around here that's like a point of sale, like you walk into the business and with your phone and scan the thing and pay, they all take and hold the crypto. But if you,
Quick thing. Where is
yes,
this?
New Hampshire,
Yeah.
which is a great place to visit because you can actually spend your crypto in a real place and not just one, but several. So that's a good spot. But anyway, yeah, they mostly do that. The thing about the stablecoin thing is an interesting argument because first off, people forget that back in the day, Bitcoin, there was a time when during the whole Brexit situation, when the UK was leaving the European Union, there was a period of a few months when Bitcoin was more stable than the British pound. And that was when people were still trying to use Bitcoin as money and not to speculate like they do today. And now Bitcoin became more volatile again. It was becoming less volatile because people were using it more. People were buying, like, so for example, if I want to use Bitcoin, I'm going to buy it and maybe I'll pay a 1% premium just for the exchange rate. And then I'll use it and I'll receive more than 1% value by using it, whether it's actually I save money or whether personally I just value that. And then, so I don't care the price I buy as long as it's about the real price. I don't really care the price. And so you have a lot of those actions happening, people buying and selling, people exchanging it makes it a lot more stable. And then on the other hand, if you have people that just don't want to buy it until it's cheap and then they don't want to sell it until it goes high and you have people playing all these games, then the price goes up and down and up and down. So I think you can have a stable currency with a lot of use. It does not need to be pegged to specific things. Now, as far as the actual stable coin itself, I'll start off by just saying that I had no problem with stablecoins. However, stablecoins are entirely a creation to get around fiat regulations. It's just because people wanted to trade between dollars and crypto, but they can't do that without a bunch of regulation. So they basically made illegal dollars to do it. That's literally what a stablecoin was created to do. And now people are starting to like find fancy ideas of like what, oh, they're so useful. In the future world, everyone's going to pay with stablecoins. First off, a fiat peg stablecoin is it's basically the an anti-crypto because it's a crypto that does the one thing you don't want it to do, which is go down in value with inflation. It's a really stupid idea. I think, like, not for a trader, by the way, not for someone who wants to move in between these things, but if like someone I saw somewhere on Twitter or something, someone seriously said that they were a stablecoin investor. They invested stablecoins. I mean, like you're just buying fake fiat and watching it go down with fiat. Like it's really stupid. But that's just my personal opinion.
But
Now,
why? What would his argument be?
I don't know. It was a crazy person on Twitter, so there's a lot of those. Uh, the thing about stable coins is when you want to peg them to a basket of goods or whatever. Um, I first off, from a cryptocurrency perspective, what are the mechanisms that peg it? Because at some point you have to receive price information on the basket of goods.
Yeah.
And so where do you get that information from? How do you secure it trustlessly to the cryptocurrency protocol? You need some sort of an oracle that feeds information into the smart contract that kind of keeps that thing. And what is the oracle based on? And it becomes a very complicated situation to trust. Now, on the other hand, um, I'm not generally in favor for like I understand that there's uses to peg the price of something to the price of something else in some cases, but generally speaking, I'm not really in favor of that approach because it's kind of like telling people what the price of something should be. Whereas the free market provides based on, utility, based on demand versus supply, which, creates prices. And so that tends to be, where it works out. So for example, money is a technology. Money is a technology to more importantly store and transmit our collective belief, which is value, what we believe to be valued. And if money is a good technology to do this, it will go up in value. Or it will have a high value, I guess. If it's not, it won't. And when people try to say, like, okay, let's create this money, but then tell people what the value is going to be of this, it becomes a little complicated and kind of, I think, indicative of you don't trust that this thing has value to begin with. If you're trying to artificially create value, that means you do not trust it organically has value.
And that's circling back to like the argument against the Taleb white paper that
Mm-hmm.
well, Taleb white paper is one thing, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sorry, I conflated two different things. We can talk about the
Mm-hmm.
Taleb white paper because I want to hear your
Mm-hmm.
opinions on that.
Yeah.
But the no black paper he called it, right? Not white paper. Um,
Mm.
uh, there's this argument of the eco-friendly Bitcoin. Bitcoin is destroying the planet. This whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
environmental argument. And you would hear that if you really look at this argument deep
Mm-hmm.
down, what the argument is really saying is like, I don't believe Bitcoin is worth anything or that cryptocurrencies have any use at all, and therefore any electricity that you spend on it is wasted, right? Because no
Mm-hmm.
one is coming and yell at me for wasting electricity from like 5 different sources to do this call with you.
Of course.
Because like so me running a YouTube channel apparently is no problem with the environment, but as soon as I'm mining Bitcoin, then I'm totally wasting it. So the
Mm-hmm.
the argument is really this isn't worth anything, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore you would even kind of like support it with the Taleb argument, which is like
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin is not pegged on any real asset and doesn't
Mm-hmm.
do any quote unquote real thing, and therefore it's actually should be considered negative value because you're burning electricity in order to gain something that should be worth nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, like that it would even build up a case for coins like Dash or
Mm-hmm.
coins that are used in an everyday setting, right? Because you want these things to actually have the use that they're portrayed to be. So
Yeah.
again, very open-ended question. What do you think
It,
about all this?
it's a very there's a lot of simple aspects to this and there's a lot of complicated aspects to this. But basically, uh, first off, what we need a lot of times because proof of work mining uses electricity, people take it more they they see it more. They see the energy expenditure. They see people run these machines that in their mind does nothing but burn electricity and it's a waste. So people they conflate a couple different things. They conflate energy expenditure with environmental destruction. And there can be cases where they're the same thing, but it's not necessarily always the case. There's ways of of using electricity without destroying the environment, and there's ways of destroying the environment without using electricity. And so when you compare to, for example, fiat currency, like paper currency, first off, let's just talk about the paper currency. How much of the environment is destroyed in order to just create the paper that creates the currency, that creates the cash? How much electricity do ATMs run just being on all the time like that? And then also the banking servers and things like that for the financial system, how much electricity does that take? I would like to compare that before I would make that kind of a, oh, this is bad, this is good, because they both use electricity to run the system. Now, the difference is, and this is I believe that proof of work um, become it becomes it's inefficient at this stage of where a lot of what people are getting is from the block reward,
Mhm.
because basically people burning electricity and they get Bitcoin for it for the most part. I mean, obviously it's way more complicated than that, but that's a good starting point. And over time, more and more of that will be from fees. So it's not just you burn it to do that, you burn it so then you can process the transactions. And so that does take its own kind of energy expenditure, even if you didn't mind to just process transactions and payments. The extra energy expenditure is just for extra security to secure the thing. So one
Mhm.
could say, oh, it doesn't cost that much, but then you have to hire some security professionals to be online all the time to like make sure that everything's going well. It's kind of the same thing, except in a more automated way. And so basically, I believe that if we go to a world where a proof of work cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, let's just say Bitcoin for whatever, decides to scale on chain or whatever, it ends up being used for payments. Uh, at some point, the proof of work portion of what miners do, the actual just running the thing and burning electricity, will be a much smaller percentage of what they actually do, because most of what they'll be doing is processing these giant batches of transactions as everyone's sending payments. So it'll still be, I guess I wouldn't say wasteful is not the right word, but they'll still be burning this electricity for security. But a lot of it'll be a much smaller percentage of what the energy goes to is just running it to keep security. So that's one thing, for example. Um, the other thing, though, is I think that I believe that there's more efficient ways of reaching that level of security. And that's one thing I like about the Dash model is that the masternode layer that does some extra things, and as of the last two or so years, has like an anti 51% attack prevention method called chain locks, which basically makes it extremely secure despite having much less energy expenditure than Bitcoin. And so if Bitcoin you had something like this as well, it could, let's just say, to be really, have 10 times the security for half the energy expenditure. And so I think you can do something like that. Now, of course, the logical conclusion of that is to say, well, why not? Why half? Why not just get rid of it all and go full proof of stake? Um, I don't know, but I have some misgivings with proof of stake with a pure 100% proof of stake model. One thing, it gives money to you cannot if you're 100% proof of stake, you can only get money from people who already have the money. Because let's just say, how else do coins get created? Only from proof of stake. They only get created and given to people who already have the money. And so that makes it a lot less of a decentralized system on its own, which is why I'm sure like a lot of things like Ethereum did proof of work for many years before switching. It makes it a little bit easier to get it distributed and trust it. But I still, that's a big thing I have a misgiving on. Also, I would say it's a lot easier to, in some ways, to attack the infrastructure of proof of stake kind of a thing, because it's not doesn't have to be as robust technologically in order to run it. And there's another interesting thing where and this is again, these are all like half formed thoughts. This isn't a final kind of a thing, but it's also interesting how we saw with the Bitcoin hash wars, the Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin SV in particular, that there
Mhm.
was a lot of hash rate available to be used against, against an attacker, that was not being used in the meantime. So Bitcoin, like for let's just say like only half of Bitcoin's mining potential is being used today for profitability reasons. And so, for example, if you have proof of stake and you know all the money that is securing the network, you know who has all the money that is keeping you from attacking the network. You want to attack it, you have a target, you know who you're going to attack. You're like, okay, this guy, this is a whale. He has a ton of money. He's staking, he's securing the network. If I take this guy, if I attack this guy and I attack this guy and attack this guy, I should be able to attack the whole network. Whereas with proof of work, you can kind of do that with mining pools. You can say, okay, well, this big mining pool in China has like a third of the hash rate. I get after them. This one in Canada, I'm going to go after this one in Texas, and then I get to take down the network. But there could be a lot of people with machines that they're just not using right now that are kind of hidden, and if the network's actually being attacked and it's not about making money, it's just about securing the network, then everyone's going to turn on their machines and then you won't be able to attack them. The kind of hidden hash rate thing. So I personally, I do think pure 100% proof of work is a little bit of an old technology. Like I do think that we should move past that. And at the same time, I don't think that we should get rid of proof of work yet because I don't see a better solution right now. I don't think proof of stake is better. So that's just kind of where I'm at with all that. But basically, as far as the energy consumption question is concerned, I think that over time, this will be less of a problem. But also, even now, I don't think it's a problem compared with all the other useless, stupid things that take up energy.
I mean, and you have to think as well when we're talking about useless, stupid things that spend a
Mm-hmm.
lot of energy. The banks, they don't have five guys fighting off all the attackers and they all take
Mm-hmm.
different shifts and
Mm-hmm.
when one goes out, the other one comes in, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're also using similar cryptographic systems. You just don't see
Mm-hmm.
them or they're
Yeah.
just not minting money. So in
Mm-hmm.
the end, these things are spending energy. Their fax machines are spending energy. The people
Mm-hmm.
sitting in the office, they don't all take the train, right? Some of them have their cars, they fly private jets, they do like the same or more waste. And you would even take a look at the statistics of CO2 emissions, and it
Mm-hmm.
turns out like 10 companies spend or produce
Mm-hmm.
46% of all the CO2 in existence in the world. So there's
Yeah.
actually like a handful of people. If you don't want to believe in the Illuminati, at least point your finger to like a couple of people that are causing all the pollution and you would
Yeah,
be
of
right on
course.
that. So
Yeah.
like there's actually an elite that I don't know if they're
Mm-hmm.
controlling us, but they are polluting the planet, and
Mm-hmm.
you'd rather go against that against Johnny and whoever running mining pools or
Well, and that's the other aspect of this. We talk about you add the political element to it. Um, it's pretty interesting to see how the geopolitical aspects of mining, because for the longest time, one of the biggest polluters in the entire world has been China. And China is a lot of other powers in the world don't like China's power. And so there's a a lot of these environmental pressures could be a covert way of trying to pressure China into reducing their power by without saying it directly, right? And so when people are going after that kind of stuff, they think, "Oh, China's running too much of like people." I believe just about everyone in government, if not everyone, but just about anyone at the top, like every world leader, understands that cryptocurrency is here to stay in some way, shape, or form. It's the future, and they understand that China, until recently, had most of the mining power
Mhm.
for all that. And so rather than just say, "Oh, we need to do war with China," or "China, you suck this way," instead of that stuff, they're just saying, "Oh, Bitcoin's energy usage. We care about the environment," knowing that China's the one that has a lot of this running on not renewable energy, for example, as like a way of getting at China and taking their power away. So I really think I don't believe the environmental concerns for Bitcoin in particular, but also all cryptocurrency. I do not believe they were done in good faith. I believe that mostly they were done as a way of trying to fight against China's power without actually fighting against China's power.
And since we're doing conspiracies, I mean, I don't think conspiracies are a fun thing because like the word
Hmm.
conspiracy theory or the phrase
Hmm.
conspiracy theory is still carries like this
Yeah.
negativity on it,
Yes.
whereas like at the same time we're all conspiracy theorists on one level or the other. Like I mean, conspiracies are real. We too can
Hmm.
start a conspiracy right now against
Yeah.
another YouTube channel or whatever. So like
Are you
conspiracies
the
are
one
an
that
actual
are you
thing.
the one that got rid of BitBoy? You can confess right now.
I
Just kidding.
wish. I
Just
wish.
kidding. Just kidding.
But
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
you want to point to an interesting conspiracy here, one would be that all the agenda of all the ecological agenda that people should take ecology into their own hands, it's
Hmm.
all a convoluted effort to make it
Hmm.
to drive the attention away from the fact that politics and politicians in general have
Hmm.
been historically very bad at making companies accountable for the externalities of their actions.
Yeah.
That would be like a sound argument that
Hmm.
you're not directly charging or you're not making an effort to make these 46% of pollution go away by taking an effort to properly tax or properly regulate
Hmm.
these 10 companies that are fucking up the planet for all of us. So
Hmm.
instead, you drive the attention towards the individual efforts of Carlos throwing this bottle in
Hmm.
the trash instead of like washing it and then doing
Yeah.
whatever. So, I mean, that would be the conspiracy that you would have to point out instead of just saying Bitcoin energy waste equals bad, right?
Yeah. And I don't think I kind of take even a more simplistic view than that. I don't think that you need to have a big crazy conspiracy for those kinds of things to happen. Like for
No,
example,
not even.
yeah, I do believe that for example, like just say the issue of the environment in general, that it's something that scientists and activists and people like that have been calling attention to for a while. And at some point, governments start to say, okay, well, we have to address this if we're going to win our election campaigns. This is something that's popular. We have to talk about it. And so they start talking about it. And then as soon as they start talking about it, we need to do something. Then all their corporate sponsors call them up and say, yo, you can't do anything about that. That'll ruin our business model. We won't give you any money anymore. And they're like, okay. And then they start modeling their specific agendas and regulations to leave their friends alone but attack the competition of their friends just because they want to get elected or whatever. And then it just kind of snowballs into that, and then eventually you realize that, oh, this is a powerful tool. I can do anything I want by just saying it's for the environment. I can even get Greta to come up there, how dare you, to Bitcoin or whatever it is. And now they're just saying, well, this is already a powerful political tool. Now we don't like these currencies that we can't control, these decentralized digital currencies. So we're going to just throw the environment thing at them because we can. It's convenient. And
And
it,
that's another
yeah.
that's another thing that's could be very well put. Like every
Hmm.
conspiracy is in the end something that's snowballed out of control. And like you
Hmm.
said, these people are not sitting in the same room all the time. They're not
Hmm.
having this conversation on purpose. That's not what
It's
we
very
mean in here.
natural.
It's natural because if let's say politician X
Hmm.
10% of their contributions come from Exxon and they're doing like a lot of the and they're doing a lot of the pollution, of course like their agenda is not going to be to regulate them or to cause trouble for them. So everything then devolves into everything you've been saying, right?
Hmm.
And that's what you mean by they're friends. It's not like they're just friends because they go burn a giant statue
Hmm.
together every summer.
Yeah, of
they're
course.
friends because they're donating.
Yeah. And a lot of people's interests align. And that's the other thing people don't I don't think humanity does not understand itself very well at all. And there's a big rational component to what people believe, but there's also a giant social component where people say things that they don't believe to be true to sound like someone that they want to ally themselves with. And so we find that kind of happening a whole lot where when people say something, there's a chance that they're saying what they believe in their brain, but there's another chance that they're saying what will put them in the same group of someone that they want to be like work together with, or they oppose something because of the group dynamics, not because they oppose the actual idea.
And I mean, I was just taking a look since I know that you have to leave in like 10
Hmm.
minutes. I was
Yeah.
just taking a look at my notes for this, and we didn't
Hmm.
manage to touch a lot on any of them,
Yeah, it's
which means
fine.
the conversation was good.
Well, hopefully.
Of- Often, if I look at my notes a lot, it's because I just like desperately reaching out for
what
whatever I can use.
what else can I ask this idiot, just to keep things going? Hmm.
Well, that has been a case in the
Hmm.
past, and
Hmm.
if you watch through the archive, like you would find out
Yeah.
which ones they were. Um,
Hmm.
One thing that I did want to ask you, and we did talk a lot about Shapeshift and about Eric
Hmm.
Burris, and the whole thing was in the air. But when I was preparing for this at the very last minute, I saw that there was a story on the front page of the Dash subreddit
Hmm.
about how there was a lot of talking about Dash when they were talking about the progressive decentralization of Shapeshift.
Yeah.
And you
Hmm.
also mentioned that you had a chat in your channel with
Hmm.
Eric himself about this.
Yeah.
So do you think that Dash is gonna play a bigger role in the future of Shapeshift?
Um, Hopefully. I told Eric that, basically my experience working in this thing for a few years.
That's how
And
conspiracy start. I told
yeah,
Eric.
well, well, no, but we talked about it's pretty open. Um, it's hard. It's hard to specifically define. There might be an argument that BitShares was the first, but it's pretty well acknowledged that Dash was the first decentralized autonomous organization. It might be the second, but the first didn't really work out or something. I don't. The details I still have to do my research to be 100% sure, but it's it's definitely a pioneer in that space. And now that Eric Voorhees is departing on this journey, it becomes very relevant to look into the past. And then, of course, you have newer projects like Decred that came a few years later to do this kind of a thing. And I believe that Decred finally, like a couple months ago, decentralized their treasury, where Dash was about 2015, I think, did that, or maybe early 2016. I don't remember the exact time when you know but it definitely becomes relevant because we see all these different projects moving and having issues a lot of times because of governance, whether it's the community can't decide or can't make a big decision, or whether they're way too reliant on one figure, like for example Litecoin. If Charlie Lee takes off, there's no Litecoin. It's just dead. Maybe
Hmm.
not right away, but it'll take a few months, and then people forget it exists. And
You would
then,
even wonder what would happen if Vitalik wasn't there.
yeah, I mean, I think that. So I think Ethereum is, I wouldn't say too big to fail, but it's big enough right now that it will continue on. There's too many smart people involved. But
Hmm.
if Vitalik left, it would be a giant loss. And then the same thing is Monero's former lead maintainer, Fluffy Pony. He kind of left, I think, but then he also got arrested for fraud recently. And
Free fluffy
so,
pony.
yeah, well, there's a high this is entirely other discussion, but there's a high chance that he was doing a lot of actual fraudulent things. But that's a completely different subject that would take a long time. But
Long
I
time. Yeah.
digress. Without him, I don't know what Monero would be like. Without the founders of Zcash, like if Zuko and some of the other people left, would there be a Zcash? What would Firo be like without Ruben, for example, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Charles
And
Hoskinson, Satoshi.
yeah, or Bitcoin Cash without Roger Ver, although he wasn't the founder by any means. He's still like the big figure in that ecosystem. Bitcoin SV without Craig Wright, all those kinds of things, which is kind of funny because Dash's founder Evan Duffield kind of retired in early mid 2017, and then last couple years he's been basically a ghost. He's doing his own thing, and uh, Dash has been. It's hard to pinpoint who's leading Dash today because Ryan Taylor's been the CEO of Dash Core Group, which is like main development group, but a whole lot he's not been very public. He's out there, but not super public. He's not what I would call the face of Dash today because there's just so many different people out there. And so it's an example of one, it's a rare example, I would say, of one project that is still around, is still doing things, but doesn't have the founder actively involved and doesn't have a substitute founder really like leading the charge either as a strong sort of a figure.
Hmm.
So yeah, basically, I think that all that to come back, I think decentralized governance is super important. Dash started it pretty much. I mean, again, small semantic arguments, is one of the big pioneers of decentralized governance. And I don't think Dash has not evolved very much on that. And I think that's going to be, once there's been a few big developmental things released, I think that Dash will have to start focusing on evolving this governance as well, because everyone's into the governance space now. And I do think that the more the government regulates things, the more decentralized crypto will become. And so, for example, Shapeshift was a company that did things, and then the government made it hell for them. And so they started using decentralized exchanges. They just became a front end to access decentralized exchanges
Hmm.
just in time, right? So they could now do anything they wanted. And so then I'm pretty sure that the decentralizing the corporate structure, I have a suspicion that it wasn't just, oh, this is a cool thing, this is always part of our vision. I'm pretty sure part of it is also, I can see on the horizon when the government's going to make it very hard for us to operate as a company, even as just a software services provider for decentralized infrastructure. And I think everyone will be, the mantra of the future will be DAO or die. Because if you're a crypto company, like look at what Binance is going through, and Binance may very well be insolvent. I don't know. There's a lot of people around the world have been reporting that they can't withdraw their money anymore and stuff. But that's a different subject entirely. But Binance as a company is being regulated out of existence to a certain extent. Although I think I think it's here to stay, to be honest. But we're going to see that happen a whole lot more, and a lot more things will become super decentralized in practice, not just theory. So yeah, DAO or die.
We're touching on a lot of things that are like on the.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that I think about every day, because this
Mm-hmm.
is a subject that fascinates me.
Mm-hmm.
How, because there is this idea that decentralized can be its own nation, basically, that
Mm-hmm.
everyone, that you can have, back to Balaji isms,
Mm-hmm.
um, that you would have like the communist world. I don't completely agree with this, like
Mm-hmm.
that's just like the way he puts it. The
Yeah.
communist world that's led like by China, the
Mm-hmm.
proxies, the West, and then the decentralized, and that some nations might even flock towards the decentralized just because they don't want to take sides with any of the other two, because of
Mm-hmm.
all the trade-offs. So it can become like that. I mean, do you think there would even be a way for America to just say, like, the biggest nation in the world would be able to take down all these DAOs?
No, because a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, and the people involved with the DAO, including the people running the infrastructure, can be anywhere in the world. And unless somehow you find that they're all living in jurisdictions you can access and you get to them all right away, like it's not going to happen, because as you get to, you attack some people, then they move to other countries, or other people spring up in other
Hmm.
countries. And essentially, what you would have to do is
Shut down the
have,
internet.
no, not just shut down the internet, but shut down the global internet, like everyone. And there are plenty of places in the world that are hostile to the U.S. So, for example, I like the example of Edward Snowden, who, the U.S. hates him and wants to destroy him, and he's in Russia, which is arguably much less free country than the U.S.
Uh-huh.
But because they hate him, because Russia wants to serve as a hedge against the U.S. power, then they welcome him with open arms to live there. And
Uh-huh.
so if the US decides to imprison or destroy everyone involved in a decentralized autonomous organization, then all the DAOs are going to be in Russia, like based
They're
out of
having
Russia.
a.
That's what I'm saying. Like, maybe not literally, but it's going to be something like that. Like, they're all just going to be in Russia, in Iran, maybe in China or whatever else, in other countries that the US can't just send troops to.
We're having a they're having a fun back and forth between Taleb, who we have mentioned before, and
Hmm.
Snowden. Like, and
Yeah.
basically Taleb is saying that Snowden handed other information apart from the information that he publicly leaked to the Russian
Hmm.
government in order to have them stay. Yeah, to have them stay there. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's
Probably
another
not.
conspiracy. Probably
Yeah.
yes, I would say.
Well, it's probably a little more simple than that. That's the other thing with conspiracy is I like the Occam's razor principle of the most simple explanation is probably the most accurate. And so the most simple explanation is he exposed a lot of things that are very embarrassing and damaging to the US
Hmm.
government, and he was trying to run away from where they could get him. And the one country that's the most secure, because that's the most, let's be honest, the most military behind it, that is hostile to the US military, at least, would be Russia. And it serves their interests to let him stay alive, keep speaking, and things like that. And so it's a very small cost for them to just keep Snowden in their country. But the good that he does for their foreign policy, for Russian foreign policy, indirectly, right, not directly, obviously, is very high. It's a great deal because not only did he expose all this stuff, but he continues to be a voice against the US federal government and other things. And he's just the gift that keeps on giving for them because now it's one of the same reasons why RT News, Russia Today News, a state sponsored Russian news organization, had a whole bunch of anti war and libertarian people, like really hardcore libertarian people, on their channel. It's not because Russia Today is pro liberty. That's absolutely not true. But they did it because they know it harms the government of the US, and they want to just have it out there. And if it's not just a Russian propagandist, if it's an actual pro liberty person, that voice is much more effective. So it just makes very simple sense for them to just have Snowden say, like, safe and say whatever he wants,
Hmm.
and not try to make him into a puppet or whatever, not just say, oh, you have to wear like a hammer and sickle, a hat or whatever, like, just because it's his word is more effective if it's real.
Right, that's a very good point. And at the
Hmm.
same time, that would even follow the line of the
Hmm.
most entertaining outcome or the most
Hmm.
entertaining
Oh yeah,
i-
whatever
theory
that
is
thing is, I
probably
remember.
the. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact phrasing, but instead of the simplest, the most entertaining.
Hmm.
Man, I know you
Hmm.
have to go. This was a lot
Hmm.
of fun. Anything else that
Yeah.
you would like to say to the audience before you leave?
Uh, yeah. So follow me on Twitter at the Desert Links, as in desert is in hot place, links is in kitty cat. I run a podcast called the Digital Cash Network, and watch my channel. There's a lot of good stuff on there. If you are in the US or possibly soon Canada or parts of Europe, go to direct.org and you download an app, and you can basically spend crypto in your day-to-day life right now and save 5 to 12%. And there's just no reason you shouldn't. If you're watching this channel at all, you must care about decentralization and good things like that. And so just start doing it. Like, what's your excuse? So that's
You
basically it.
can do like Joel and opt out of the fiat system.
Hmm.
That's actually
Yeah.
something that this man right here has been successfully doing for 5 years. So
Why
there is
don't
no
you
reason to think that you couldn't.
opt out 20%? You don't have to opt out 100% right away. Just opt out 20%, see where that goes. Save some money while you're doing it. Why not?
Why not? Well, thank you very much, man.